welcome Robin Whalen and her expert panel.
Again, my name is Robin Whalen, and I'm a managing partner at a digital agency called Real Interactive, 6 Degrees Integrated Communications. And we're going to talk to you today about social sharing done right. And we know that social media is no longer a strategy or a channel or something that you consider doing. It's the new reality. And we've all heard the stats. 80% of adults online are on social media, the vast majority on more than one platform. Most single platform users are on Facebook, but all of the other channels are growing in leaps and bounds, whether it's Twitter or Instagram, Snapchat, LinkedIn. 18 to 29-year-olds have 90% usage on social media, and the misnomer is that the older demographics, my clients say to me quite often, but I'm talking to a 45-year-old and they're not on social media, and that's wrong. 72% of 30 to 49-year-olds are on social media. And the vast majority of social media users, again, to David's earlier talk, are on social from a mobile device. So thinking about social, you think about contextual relevance and simplicity. The stats are endless, but it's meaningless if you don't know how to produce content that is interesting and instinctively shareable, and that's what we're going to talk to you about today. So we've got a panel of experts who will share their tips and their experiences. So let's meet the panel. David Brown oversees YouTube partnerships in Canada across entertainment, family, sports, and music, growing new ways to connect audience and media. And prior to joining Google, he worked in the corporate development team at BlackBerry, focusing on mergers and acquisitions and strategic investments in consumer technology. Brian Stewart, maybe Brian, just so everyone knows, Brian Stewart, CEO of Tribute Entertainment Group. Brian has worked in marketing motion pictures since the late 70s. In his current position as CEO of Tribute Entertainment Media Group, he leads Canada's innovative award-winning entertainment marketing company. His business under the Tribute Network delivers an audience of over 4 million unique movie lovers monthly and is supportive of all the studios and exhibitors in Canada. And it's been recently reported that 40% of Tribute's audience is on mobile. Again, a common stat here. So we are all connected talking about movies and stars who make them. John McCauley, Senior Director of Marketing of Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. John has 15 years of sports, media, content, digital, and marketing experience in 5 different leagues, including the NHL, the NBA, the MLS, the AHL, and the MLB. And I admit I don't even know what some of those acronyms are, but I know everything about Tribute. So John currently oversees all marketing, CRM, digital media, and business development for multiple brands at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And his specialties are in media integration, content creation, multi-platform sponsor integration, and digital and marketing business development. We have Andrew Levine, Head of Partnership and Communication Strategy at StumbleUpon and 5by USA. Andrew leads brand integration opportunities with major media partners and directs communication strategy, including PR and social media across both StumbleUpon and 5by. And his core experience includes audience development, digital and experiential marketing, native advertising, PR, social media, and brand strategy. And Andy Levy, Director of CRM for Cirque du Soleil. As Director of Marketing 360 and Content, Andy oversees all corporate marketing, content marketing, and social media strategies for Cirque du Soleil across the globe. And since joining Cirque in early 2011, he has worked with brand and hotel partners to help develop marketing campaigns that drive awareness, social growth, and revenue. And interestingly enough, on Twitter this morning, a whole bunch of stars are tweeting about the Cirque show in Vegas last night. So pretty cool job. And last but not least, we have Mark Dwyer, Director of Verbal Identity for Interbrand Canada. With over 20 years of experience, Mark splits his time between Toronto and New York, defining and executing brand expression. Mark has written flyers, commercials for prime ministers, tray liners, TV campaigns for McDonald's, and his award-winning Foster's beer posters were pulled because one word offended one person. His Infinity campaign won awards because of its 2-word headline. So Mark is not short on words. So thank you, everyone. All right, so first question is, would love to know at a high level how your company uses social media, what platforms, and for what objective, just to get us started.
Am I first?
Sure.
Hey, everybody. We have a few objectives when we use social media at StumbleUpon. We have brand objectives and we have traffic objectives. On the brand side, we want to reinforce that StumbleUpon is the best place on the internet to discover content that's personally recommended for you. On the traffic side, we want to basically get people into our platforms, whether that's stumbleupon.com, whether that's any of our apps. And so we want to share tantalizing links that get people into the Stumble product.
Good morning. For us at Cirque du Soleil, we look at it in two ways. We look at what is the organic channel content. So for Facebook or for Twitter, for YouTube, what is the content that's going to be distributed across that channel? How is it relevant to our consumer group, and how can it resonate with them? And then there's also the direct response side, is how can we drive back to our website, acquire new Cirque Club members, new fans, and ultimately sell tickets.
Good afternoon, or good morning, everyone. For us, I think we have to go where the people are, and we use a variety of social platforms to primarily drive audience, share content, create experiences that people can really take part in as far as our brands, and really drive the live event. For us, everything is about live. Driving traffic towards that big game on Friday night or Saturday night, and really making our fans feel like they can be a part of it wherever they want to, wherever they are, whether that be on a mobile phone, whether that be on Facebook, whether that be on Twitter or YouTube or anywhere. So it's really our job to identify the areas that are where the audience is already, where the audience is playing, and then make sure that we're doing the right thing on the right platform for those folks around that live event.
Good. Good morning. With Tribute, the objective that we have with social media is to make sure that we engage fans. Movie fans are probably the most supportive fan out there for social media, next to probably the music industry, which I just heard this morning. Justin Timberlake has 32 million followers on Facebook and another 16 million on Twitter. So when Justin wants to release an album, he's already got a base that could translate into 32 million downloads. So there's a huge, huge benefit. And the same sort of thing happens in the film industry. The big difference is Tribute supports the film, not the studio per se. So every film has its own Facebook, Pinterest, Twitter strategy. Studios have teams that actually create content on a daily, hourly basis to feed social media. So it's really overtaken a whole number of other media strategies when you talk about film marketing. And, typical example is, as people look at Hunger Games started out as a very well-known book, but they were really worried would it translate like Twilight did into a series of films that would be successful. The first movie came out, and they did a number of things in social media that hadn't been done before, and they translated into it becoming a worldwide phenomenon. And today, it's a multi-billion-dollar property. And that's exactly what social media can do. It can deliver audiences that become fans, that become engaged on a daily basis, and that's really what we are all about.
Yeah, YouTube, I think that your sharing is kind of foundational to our platform. We look at it through the lens of how do we help support creators on our platform. And through that lens, I think when people think of sharing on YouTube, they kind of default to viral videos. The reality is a lot of those viral videos come from creators that have really big built-in subscriber bases, similar to your point. And so I think that's why they build these rabid communities, and that's why things like K-pop can become a $6 billion industry, even though there's only 85 million native Korean speakers in the world. And equally why creators like Bethany Moda can have 6 million subscriber direct-to-fan relationships on her YouTube channel, but also kind of cross over into clothing line deals with Aeropostale and have her fans support her doing that.
So my perspective up here, which I work with Interbrand, which is a brand consultancy. So for the most part, my comments today will be reflective of how we talk to our clients about how they execute their social strategies. So we concern ourselves mostly not why social, but how social. And for the purpose of a top line, I would say what we're most concerned about is that a social strategy is rooted deeply in the DNA of the brand strategy, so that all the content, regardless of where it's being deployed, is not just useful and relevant for the people enjoying the content, but it's about making sure that every bit of that content, no matter which platform is being used, is infused with some aspect of the brand. There's a lot of demands on how we communicate on social platforms in terms of restrictions and space. Ultimately, we want to make sure that a brand is still differentiated meaningfully, whether it's 3 words or whether it's a 10-page piece of IP. The brand has to be present, otherwise we risk all talking and sounding the same. So we concern ourselves with making sure that our client's social strategy includes a deep-rooted link to the brand strategy in terms of content structure and strategy, so that all the vendors who are doing their best work actually have tools they can use to always be able to reassure themselves in the fullness of time, and they usually have very little time, that they're speaking on brand through messaging tactics and voice principles that help differentiate the brand. Every time, doesn't matter where it's happening, the brand gets differentiated, and through tools that make that job relatively simpler, so that vendors and whoever's communicating on behalf of the brand doesn't have to start over every time and say, what does this brand want to say and how does it say it? So we ensure that our clients are well armed with those kind of tools for social.
Great. So carrying along that theme, we want to talk about a content strategy, and I'm curious to hear from you how you develop one. And once you've defined what your content strategy is, do you do it on your own? Do you seek the use of a third party? How do you individually approach the development of the content for the obvious objective of having it shared? And I think Dave, you had some insight on that.
Yeah, sure. So we spend a lot of time thinking about this with our partners, very much at the beginning, in terms of how do we want to engage our fans, what type of content is going to resonate well. And I think first and foremost, it's paramount to understand the notion of why people share. And I think to put it in crass terms, people mostly share because they want to be themselves a broadcaster of information. So I want to seem smart. So that I'm going to share this piece of global news, or I want to be seen as someone who curates a lot of funny content. Therefore, I want to be, the first one to post this funny video that I think is going to start trending. And once you've established that, we really break it down into 2 fundamental buckets. One is kind of a programming strategy with creators, and the other is an audience development strategy. And so, the programming strategy is really looking at things like, how often should I post? How do I be topical? How do I be discoverable? And how do I, create content that people are going to share? And then the audience development piece is more looking at things like once I've developed that as a core content strategy, how do I continue to optimize for the specific platform, in this case YouTube, that I'm distributing content on? But certainly, we don't view content that is shareable and goes viral and builds sustained audiences being in a silo on YouTube. So, we also work with them in terms of some of the other platforms that they could or should be leveraging to help distribute that content.
Brian?
Yeah, I think the reality is that what we try to do, and what the studios are constantly trying to do, is develop content that's engaging. And that means identifying your audience and their profile of that audience you're trying to reach, and making something relevant to them. Some of the most successful things are always those unique things that happen. You talk about Jennifer Lawrence falling to the Academy Awards. Some people are in my industry talking about it might have been staged to create some more interest and give her a little bit more compassion about her role and her potential for the Oscar and so on. But you go through that process again, and the studios are very, very intelligent when it comes to identifying who their audience is and how to create interesting pieces that they can post to social network that go viral. Another example, Yamato Spider-Man opened last weekend to what they consider a record box office. They might have wanted a little bit more, but opened to $92 million. And simultaneous with that, you may also know from the media perspective that Emma Stone and, what's his name? Yeah, are
Garfield.
dating. And in the old days, that used to happen on studio lots all the time, where the stars were told to date socially outside of the movie they were starring in. So you sort of wonder whether or not the studio's behind some of the relationships that we see in the media, because it really does help women become engaged with a movie like Spider-Man. So now people are going to see it as a relationship that they have in real life translate into on screen. So these are all sorts of things that you do behind the scenes, and I don't call it manipulation, but they're trying to get the fan engaged and get the fan to want to go and see that movie. So it's all about trying to put bums in seats, basically. And that's really how we look at all movies, and every movie is different. Every movie has a different hook on it. And I think that's the key, is identifying those types of hooks that are available and then using social media to expand it to the audience.
So how does it differ in the sports world, John?
Well, I think what's different for us is that we have, 100 plus media members covering us every day. People are telling our stories outside of our own individual platforms as well. So our content strategy has been, we want to get as close to the team as possible. We want to embed our community managers and our folks that are powering our content engine to get them as close to the players as possible, get them as close to the behind the scenes, and embed them on the plane and embed them in the dressing room so that they're getting the best stuff. They're showing things that the traditional media covering sports aren't necessarily concentrating on. We're trying to humanize our players. We're trying to provide them an opportunity to not always talk about X's and O's of the individual sports. And key to that has been putting those people in the position to get those pieces of content in real time. There's nothing more impactful than content in context. You just heard a lot about that in the previous session, but we live that every single day. And if you don't have the people in place to capture those things live, then the context part of it goes away, and you're just kind of filtering things out and sending things out because you have them. We have to do it. We have to have the access, and we have to actually have the context to go along with that access to bubble up above what is actually a really competitive marketplace for sports media.
So Andrew, your world would be completely different.
Yeah, our world is completely different. We first want to start by really understanding who the Stumbler audience is, and that audience is largely millennial. And so we want to understand how millennials are talking to each other and mimic that to a degree. We sort of kick around in the office that we want to be the cooler older sibling, that you have to sort of take what they say as true and cool. As far as the actual content that we post across our platforms, one thing is that we're always testing, we're always refining what we're doing, and we're at a strong disadvantage in that this StumbleUpon system has 150 million unique web pages in it, and we know which of those pages perform best based on engagement, based on consumers spending time on those pages, based on shares, based on thumb up behaviors, and we're able then to look at those pages in real time and use those against our social efforts. And it's really our job to be really native to the individual platforms as far as how we use those articles, when we use those articles. And so that's really our strategy. And then we were always trying to stay as active as possible within the community. By staying active, it just shows that you care. And that's really important to millennials.
Mark? About your approach to developing a content strategy, and do you do it on your own, for example, or do you source third party, or how do you go about it?
So again, the lens for me from Interbrand as a brand consultancy, so our content strategy recommendations certainly start with opportunity mapping. So this is similar to what we do with the brand when we're doing the work to figure out a positioning, for instance. So you go out there, you get to know if millennials are the stakeholders, then you get to know what their journey looks like for the brand. You look for opportunities based on the competitive set to find out who's saying what and how they're saying it. And then you move into basically what we're eventually going to present back to our client is a full strategy that takes into account what kind of content needs to be whether it's curated or created internally or whether it's user-generated, touch point prioritization to figure out how to get the right message to the right story to the right people at the right time. how to continue the engagement according to a calendar. So we'll map this out over a period of time. You know a year ahead basically what your meta stories are, but you have freedom within to move, so you can change stories on the fly. But most of that stuff is in place and in a calendar, and you're essentially having all of the vendors work together from one strategy that captures the essence of a brand. And as I said earlier, everything that goes out needs to be in some way representative of the brand's vision, so that whether it's a tiny little set of words or a CEO script, everything is coming from the same strategy. What happens, sometimes we're finding and hearing more often that as brands are becoming publishers out of necessity, they're publishers without a past history of being a publisher. So they have to pull a team together really quickly of vendors, and the vendors are doing their best work, but they may not have the first generation version of the strategy. It gets passed along because this is not a tight network yet. It's a growing network in real time. And it's really hard for everyone to be on voice and on message to a degree that you're always confident as a brand that you're being represented with relevance and impact. So we ensure that our approach is to ensure that there's a central guiding document. Let's say it's the brief that lives at the middle. It's not a handcuff, it's not handcuffs, but it gives everybody who is communicating on behalf of the brand the tools to very quickly make sure that the content is imbued with the right strategic messaging, and it's expressed with the right brand voice. And they need tools. They say, well, how do I write in this voice? Don't just tell me what the brand personality is. That isn't enough. So they're equipped with communication tools that they can use right away, every day, to get the content out. And again, this content is now being driven from one strategy that captures the brand vision, and it's being rolled out with one set of guidelines, verbal and visual. And that's important to note that this runs right through video, motion graphics, design, any aspect of the communication. And as I said, everything is calendared. There's room to move, but essentially you know as a brand what you're going to be saying, when you're going to be saying it, to which audience, and how to keep that conversation going, and ultimately change behavior in doing so over a prescribed period of time.
Okay, so you've done all your homework, you've done your research, you understand your audience, you understand what's culturally relevant, what people find interesting, and you've produced the content. The crux of our talk today is really, how do you get it shared? What are those best practices once that content is out there to maximize engagement and get it out to as many people as possible to get people talking? What are your best practices for sharing, and why don't we start with Andy?
Yeah, I think it's first and foremost identifying what your goals are, not just to get it shared, but what is the effect of having it shared. Establishing KPIs are key. I think a lot of people, who are kind of going out there from a social perspective are saying, oh, well, we want X amount of likes, or we want X amount of shares. Well, I think the message you'll probably hear over and over again is right place, right time, right person. So it's got to be relevant, it's got to be key. It has to resonate as well with the key audience. So it's using the native platform tools, whether it's Facebook or Twitter or YouTube, and understanding what analytics you can use behind that. Like YouTube has a great manager's insight tool as well, where it tells you audience retention rate, et cetera. So it's really making sure that you understand and you learn from those things. And I think Gary said it earlier, is, especially in the digital space, don't be afraid to fail.
Right.
Failure equals data, and the more data that you can pull out of it, the more you can say, okay, last time we posted this video, it was 90 seconds long. You know what? Everyone left after 17 seconds. So whatever we did in those 17 seconds didn't resonate with the consumer. They abandoned. So how do we make sure that the next video or the next campaign we want to capture that person for 30 seconds? How do we improve that? So I think it's a constant evolution and a constant going back and reviewing what you're doing and building that baseline. Because a lot of campaigns that you'll build, at least from our experience, are things that you've either never done before or it's talking to an audience that you've never talked before. So the baseline is really tough, so you have to establish it and you have to remember it. I think that's a key thing. And I like to say that we as marketers get selective amnesia. You forget about the campaign, 3 months, go by and you're like, okay, let's just do this. Well, what did you do last time? Who did you talk to? Was it relevant? Did it resonate?
Right. Brian?
Yeah, I think that what we discovered very quickly is that relevance is the number one key to any form of social media posting. It's try to identify your audience, know know what they're looking for. And I think that what we also noticed with the studios is because a new movie comes out virtually every week, and a number of them do, there's always a new opportunity to engage an audience in a slightly different manner. And that's where social media has such a phenomenal impact. And I think that's one of the keys. When you post a trailer to YouTube, it's probably the number one place in the world to go for trailers these days. A trailer goes up, and it's not unheard of to have 15 million people view a trailer in a period of a week. That's extraordinary impact. And now what we're finding too, social media has a huge impact on the ability to deliver audiences, specifically into theaters. Word of mouth is the second largest method of communicating or getting people to go see movies. Word of mouth now is social media. It's not going to the movie theater and phoning your buddy and saying, I just saw a great movie. It's sitting in the movie theater saying, I'm watching a great movie. It's instantaneous. And that has created a huge impact. And in fact, the numbers are 65% of the audiences that go to movies now are impacted by some word of mouth message. So that's a phenomenal trait, and I think quite honestly, we're just seeing the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the impact social media can have and when it gets to actually delivering audiences. John and I were talking before the seminar about how potentially when an auditorium is not full, will a movie theater be able to send out a social media message saying, come on in, seats are half price. That will happen. I mean, there's a point when you can actually engage that audience in your neighborhood, in the mall, and send messages. We've heard about it. We know some people are experimenting with it. And that is going to be changing the way people engage in entertainment. I think all the industries in entertainment are finding very unique ways to do so. And that's what's fascinating about watching this evolve. A year from now, we'll be having a different conversation. It's going to change that quickly again. And I think that's what's exciting about it. And the whole thing, again, come back to one thing and only one thing. Keep it relevant. I think we all hate spam. You can put your hand up if you agree with that. We don't want to be spam. We don't want to think it's spam. We want to think that we're looking at content that we think is interesting to our likes and dislikes.
So do you think then, this is for any of you, that we're all talking about relevance, but relevance changes day to day based on cultural norms and whatever else is happening. I'm assuming that the tips for sharing stay the same. The best practices for sharing stay the same, even though what is deemed relevant changes from second to second.
Well, I think the principles stay the same. It's whatever, and David talked about this earlier, whatever is resonating with pop culture, you have to either conform or adapt to that.
Right.
But the principles stay the same. It's be relevant. If you're not relevant, it's just white noise and you're wasting your time, your efforts, and your media dollars.
I think if I throw in, if we watched the Fashion Wars the other night, Entertainment Tonight, ET, all these shows covered it. That was really relevant on Monday night and Tuesday.
Right.
It's not as relevant today. So, I don't even know the numbers, but I imagine the numbers were in the millions about who wore the best dress, who almost fell out of their dress. All those things that happen around an event like that creates very interesting social networking opportunities and social use. So I think those are the kind of things that makes it relevant when it happens. And John's more in that business than I am. I'm about the planning process of making social media work. John's about the instantaneous because his is real time. His is a little bit, it can go, I can't even imagine what happened the other night.
Yeah, I mean, you have to have the right people in place to make decisions on the relevance based on what happens, right? Like you have an interesting situation where, how many people here have seen the Raptors We the North spot? Show of hands. Okay, pretty good number of people. That is a concept that we put out there that is going to drive the Raptors brand over the coming years and all of that. But how do you, in real time, separate the fact that we lost by 1 point in Game 7 from that campaign? That campaign is us. That campaign is what the Raptors brand is going to stand for going forward. But the heartbreak that everybody felt when Kyle Lowry came down the lane and got his shot blocked was instant heartbreak. And how does that affect your campaign? And how does that affect the things that you're doing? You have to have great people in place that understand the moment and understand what they should be saying based on what everybody is feeling. And the closer that my team and people that are playing the role of the brand in social media are they need to feel what you feel. You need to say what you are saying. And if you go back in the timeline and take a look at Twitter, or take a look at the videos we put on YouTube or our Facebook posts, they felt that pain. That pain is you can't hide from that. You have to embrace it. That's sports. That's the way it goes. And that's why people love sports, because it's not scripted. You don't know the end, and there is only one time that Game 7 against the Nets on Sunday is ever going to happen again. It's done. It's over with. How do you grow from that? How do you take all of the audience that was created around that time and the good feelings and keep it going? That's the real the crux of the sports industry, is the power of live, and how you can either try to create a connection with your fan base based on what everybody has witnessed, and then how do you, when things are going really well, create that top spin to make things bigger than they really are.
Right. Andrew, did you have perspective on this, given what you do for a living is about taking content that has been shared and that is deemed useful?
Sure. I mean, relevance for us is more on a 24-hour cycle. And again, it relates back to testing. We learned quickly that people like inspirational content in the morning. That gets better engagement. We're not going to share breakfast recipes at 6:30 at night. So our relevance is more on that 24-hour cycle. Again, I think everyone's really said it. It's about being relevant. It's about talking to the audience in a relatable voice that's relevant to them.
Okay, so we've talked about relevance, we've talked about fail fast, learn from those failures, apply it, living in the moment. Do you in order to capture all of this, who here uses social tools to help manage your platforms and your social strategy, and why? Do you use it to measure engagement? Do you use it to drive reach? I'm curious to know what tools you use and for what reason. So maybe we start with John.
For our purposes, it's a little easier for us to know when something is working, when we know when I see that when those kind of hands come up for a spot that's created around a team. People want to watch that stuff, so we know it's easier for us to understand when we've been successful. But the tools that we would use are the basic tools within the platforms that are garnering the most audience. And views are important to us, return users are important to us, average time on site, all of the metrics that are really true factors of long-term engagement are the ones that we really pay attention to over time. And then our business is interesting in that if we win on Sunday, I know that's the greatest day it's still the biggest day in digital audiences for the Raptors Sunday, but if we win, it's double what it actually turned out to be. So we've got this whole wins and losses thing that kind of is layered on top of everything we do, and we have to recognize the fact that live events drive our business. And if March was really great for digital engagement, hey, last March we only had 13 games versus 16 games. Oh, that's why March numbers are up 200%, because the live event is so important to us. And that's I said a long time ago to our CEO at the time, he's like, what can we do to drive more audience? I said, can we get more games? Can we play 160 Leaf games a year? That would be the best thing for it. And then putting the team in place that can capitalize on those events. So, you will see more events from us that are outside of the games. We did season launch events for each of our teams last year that were for our season ticket holder base, but we want to expand those and get those out there so that everybody can come down and be part of a season launch show, if you will, at Air Canada Centre or out in the square or wherever. So the metrics that we use are the same ones everybody else uses in the media industry, but we have this caveat that we have to keep in mind so that when our highs are high, we're not super geniuses because Sunday was the biggest day in Raptors history, but we're also not, you have to remember when things are going sideways that it's not true either. So you've got to ride that wave a little bit in our industry.
Right. Andy, does Cirque du Soleil use any kind of tool, whether it's for measuring engagement or it's for driving impressions or what have you? Are there any tools you use other than the native platform tools?
Yeah, so we have 19 shows, 8 shows in Las Vegas, 11 touring the rest of the world. So we're talking 19 different voices, 19 different time zones, 19 different brands. So from an editorial calendar point of view, it's crazy. And we found the need to switch over to some sort of system that we would be able to publish all the right content at the right time to the relevant audience, et cetera, et cetera. So we recently transitioned over to Adobe Social. It's been pretty great so far. For us, the ability, we also use Adobe Analytics to track all of our web campaigns as well. So the ability to tie into both platforms has been pretty powerful. So we know not just if it's a direct response campaign, but if it's just an organic post or in a tweet or something, how many people converted off of that, where they drove to, et cetera. It also has a listening tool. We also use Radiant 6 as well. Because for us, we have, like I said, we have 19 shows. Some of them have difficult names that people are going to misspell or not know how to spell. We put into the system, I think there's 300 or so different variations of spelling Cirque du Soleil because it's not easy to spell. So there are people who are talking about us and we may not be aware of them. So we have to listen and we want to see, okay, if they're misspelling us and they're saying a great comment, let's interject ourselves. If they're misspelling us and they're saying something terrible about us, which very rarely happens, but if they are, we want to interject ourselves and have our customer service team, and that's another thing too, is we have our customer service team tied into our social platforms as well, because we don't want those complaints or those issues to linger. We want someone to be able to jump into that right away. It's a 24-hour business for us with being across the globe, and I think it's the same reality for everybody up here. So it's a challenge, but you have to have the right tools in place, and you have to scale depending on the size of your enterprise and the size of your team. But tools like that are really necessary to help manage your presence.
So I'm curious because we talked a lot about relevance and how do you measure relevance. You use Radiant 6. Do any of the other panelists use social listening tools to help deem what's relevant, understand what's being said about your brand?
Sure. So one thing we do is we use social listening tools essentially to inform the content that's being created all the time. So for instance, we have about 40 writers who are always creating content ahead of the curve. So it has to be meta content so that it can be tailored as we go so that it's completely relevant. But if we start to see through social listening and brand playback, which is a tool we use, a shift in sentiment or opinion, then what happens is we go back to the material that's already been prepared according to the content strategy and the activation plan, which is all in place. And that way we have, rather than starting over all the time, like, oh, hell, we're wrong, we can actually just fine-tune the content we've already created in terms of the overall strategy and activation plan. So for instance, if we hear that, you mentioned the tool that can catch spelling mistakes. So now I know that apparently I work at StumbleUpon. So now I know through my listening that I can fix that next time and say that I work at Interbrand.
Right. Great. Okay, so last formal question is about engagement. And it's a 3-part question. The first part is, what metrics do you track? And we've talked a little bit about tools, but what metrics do you track? What tool do you use? Is it just Facebook Insights, for example? And the third thing is, do you find that there is enhanced pressure or need or requirement to benchmark those KPIs? So what we're finding in our agencies is our clients are now increasingly saying, and I know there's big debate over likes, but I want to know exactly how many likes I'm going to get during this promotion. I want to know the number of 28-day people talking about, how many shares, and how many comments. So we're starting to have to benchmark the metrics to a granular level. So what metrics do you track? Do you use tools other than the platform tools to measure? And then are you benchmarking KPIs at a micro or at a mass level?
We use primarily the native tools, and our biggest benchmark was this week better than last week? Because if this week was better than last week, it's just an upward curve. And that's what we really push our team to do. Again, our most important action that someone can take is to come to our platform or is to take action and start stumbling within an app. So traffic truly is our number one. And if traffic this week was better than traffic last week, then we're doing a lot of the right things.
So John, I guess for you, it's, I mean, if there's a game on, but do you measure metrics?
Absolutely. There's kind of two different categories of metrics that I pay attention to. There is, the sexy category. How many likes do we have? Big time numbers that you can use when you're asking for more money and all of that stuff. Oh, we have 1 million followers on Facebook. We're number one in the NHL. Yada yada yada. Those are the great ones that we use to present the overall audience opportunity, and you got to continually grow those, and you measure those on the appropriate platforms, whether it be YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or whatever. Then there's the actual, how do we judge ourselves on how well we're doing our job metrics? Like I was talking about, did this get shared? Did we put the right post up at the right time? How do we overall use the actual day-to-day of our content strategy to drive more interactions, which is what I pay a lot more attention to. I know, it's pretty tough if you're, in my space not to grow Facebook likes year over year, especially if the teams are cooperating with you. Some stats just out of the Raptors in April, we grew 180,000 likes on Facebook. That's the campaign, that's the team, that's all of those things.
And it's you, I'm sure.
Yes, no, it's totally all me. But the thing is that you've got to separate the two in our business, and really the highlights, or what I would call metrics, and using the appropriate platforms for those, and then really drilling down with the appropriate tool, whether it be Radiant6 or Sysmos or any of the other tools that are out there to help you do a better job day to day. We actually judge ourselves year over year in like years. So I know that if the team did well in last year and I compare that to this year and there was a big difference, then I have an explainable variance, right? And that's how we have to do it. But when you go down to the next layer, did the strategies you put in place, are they moving the dial individually by the concept or by a campaign like We the North or Bloody Big Deal on the TFC side?
Great. Dave, I'm assuming coming from the mecca of analytics measurement, what's Google's perspective on this?
We spent a lot of time obviously looking in the YouTube analytics, both from our perspective as YouTube, but as well from our partners' perspective. And so I think the main metric for us in terms of how we hold ourselves accountable, and the main metric in terms of how partners view their success, is around watch time. And that's kind of the overarching. If there's good watch time duration and there's good retention on the individual videos holistically, the rest of those metrics tend to fall into place. But once you start drilling into more and more detail, you start getting into, on a per video basis, where are my subscribers coming from? How many people subscribe to my channel and identified with the type of content and type of messaging that I'm trying to get across from this video versus from another video? Where is my audience coming from? like geographically, how are they relating to my content? And as Andy nailed it earlier, where are people falling off in my content? So we have creators. Freddie W. mentioned that people asked him, well, what led you to create a 8-episode, 30 to 40 minutes per episode content? And his simple answer was, I looked at the analytics from my previous content and saw that people were watching all the way to 15 or all the way to 20. And so why limit myself if the content is good enough to support all of that? And I think all of our partners probably have one of those stories where, they reach their own tipping point in terms of, okay, we've got something here. We've got something that really resonates with an audience. Let's continue to build on that. But that comes, I think, primarily from looking at watch time and then really drilling into some of those other details.
I think that's a really good point that Dave brings up, because you have to define the KPIs, obviously, but you have to understand what goes on behind those KPIs. Like someone could say, hey, we want 10,000 views in one day on this YouTube video. But going to Dave's point, if everyone's leaving after 15 seconds, you just wasted that opportunity of those 10,000 views. That's 10,000 people that you just turned away from another 10 seconds, 30 seconds, whatever, for you to convey your message. So it's not just saying, okay, we want likes, we want shares, we want views, but understanding what the consequences and what the effects are behind that data. So it's taking the data from a high level and kind of scraping and going a little more meta, I think.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and say we're sort of a hybrid of everybody on the panel because the film industry works on a weekly basis. And every week there's something new. And the irony is every week a different movie has a different Facebook strategy. So you're dealing on probably a 10-day to 2-week window to garner an audience in social media. Then the week after the movie opens, that social strategy's gone and the studios tend to abandon that Facebook posting. It sits dormant for a while, then disappears. So it really is a little bit different. So our metrics, really about measurement, is what's the box office look like on Friday night? Because without that box office performance, the movie won't be playing the next week. So it's very, very critical to look at how much push there is against getting your social engagement in a very short window, and then what the delivery is going to be in the box office. And we know that Friday night at midnight, we know which movies will be there next week. We know what the whole weekend box office will be. It's pretty well templated right now. If you know we do a certain number on Friday, you know what your Saturday and Sunday are going to be. And that really is how the industry functions. So what's frustrating is the huge loss of that social network you create for the movie opening and the drop-off afterwards. And I think what you're finding now is they're starting to discover in our industry that if you have a Spider-Man site up, the next Spider-Man come out next year. If you maintain that Spider-Man site, you will have consistency, you'll have a fan base. Hunger Games has done that, but other than Marvel and a few other people that have looked at how they keep the Avengers popularity going and Iron Man and so on, most of the studios have dropped those social things. And I think that's something that these guys that sell to the studios in some cases have to start forcing them to say, guys, don't abandon this stuff because it really has value. Keep on supporting it, keep on creating postings and follow it.
I think also to that point, the value of the community really kicks in post-box office. Yeah. So the example that we love to use internally is Disney's Frozen and Let It Go. And their box office success, they were riding a wave. They started to falter a little bit in the box office, but things really took off from fan uploads that were creating their own Let It Go versions. And that took off on YouTube and generated, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 million plus views. And suddenly, all of a sudden, that groundswell starts to impact, people's behavior in general.
Travolta might have had something to do with that.
Film of all time now.
Right, and actually took it back into the number one position in the box office after going down, which you don't see very often.
Sure.
But I think that underscores the importance of building this community that you're talking about.
So just to wrap up, let's do some navel gazing. I'm curious to know, what do you think are the next trend? What's the next best thing to happen
I'm going to give away
social?
some movie passes to the next best thing to the audience.
Hey, go for it.
We'll show how social media works. I have 5 premiere passes to Godzilla next week. All you have to do is tweet Godzilla at CMW to Tribute Mag. And the first 5 people to do that will get double movie passes to the premiere. If you don't like Godzilla, because I have seen it and it's worth checking out, I have 5 passes to Jersey Boys coming out another month from now. Clint Eastwood's next film. Do the same thing. Tweet Jersey Boys, CMW to Tribute Mag, and the first 5 people to do so will win. So if you're a movie fan, go for it. And we'll see how social media works.
Great. Okay, next best thing. Anybody?
We love mobile video. 2 years ago, people's phones couldn't support it. Now everyone's phone, you can take out your phone and you can watch a video in 5 seconds. At StumbleUpon, we actually acquired a mobile video platform in September called 5by. It's a Canadian company, so we hope everyone will support it and check it out. We're really excited about the product. We think that there's an opportunity to create a conversation around mobile video. So that's our big bet. That's one of our big focuses. The other thing that we haven't really talked about today is the organic versus paid elements to social. And social, as we all know, is becoming really expensive, particularly for small brands. So it's almost like an anti-trend, but the idea of investing in your wholly owned entity. So we'll see brands, and Digiday talked about it this morning, reinvesting in their websites, reinvesting in their owned email strategies. In some cases, if you have big budgets and it's appropriate to your strategy, it's investment in your own apps. So, I think that it's a bit of an anti-social strategy, but no one can charge you for sending an email if you own that email list. So that's something that we're focused on at StumbleUpon, and we see that as sort of an extension of social beyond the on-the-platform executions.
I'm listening. I'm just writing down what you're saying, so you don't think I'm rude. Okay, John?
Being in sports as long as I have, I've seen, as new things have come out over the last 15 years, whether it be first the web, then video on the web, then social, then live, then streaming, and all of these, mobile now, all of these different things have come together at different times. And I think what you're going to see over the next 10 years is really the simplification of the digital media landscape, and really how do those things all come together and really just be your media strategy and really simplify the user experience. I think we'll stop talking about mobile or social or online or broadcast or any of these things, and they're just media. And our media strategy is not about the platform. The media strategy is about the concept that you're talking about at the time, and you would be foolish not to have a social strategy or a mobile strategy as part of that. And I think that's really what I'm seeing happen a little bit more with brands over the last little bit, and I think it's going to become more and more integrated as one thing.
Yeah, I love that thought about media just being media, and we can stop giving it like kid sister cute nicknames at conferences. Yeah, I think for us, it seems like the platforms and the distribution platforms are all kind of becoming standardized. People are becoming more familiar with how to engage on them with their brands. And so the thing that I think that's going to trigger is really innovative content formats going forward. And we're starting to see it already with stuff like epic rap battles. Does everyone know the channel Epic Rap Battles on YouTube?
No.
So stuff that probably would never do overly well in an old executive boardroom pitch meeting, but stuff that as they're playing with it and tweaking with it in some of these new distribution methods, they're saying, wow, this really resonates with people. Bad lip reading is another good example of someone just doing really innovative stuff with content formats. And then what they're able to do in terms of like the relevance conversation that we had earlier is apply that to things that are trending, knowing that they've kind of got this thing figured out from a format perspective.
I think to pick up a little bit on what John was saying, as we head towards this kind of medium agnostic world, that plays in nicely with a couple other shifts. I mean, one of them is we know that digital has done this great job of drawing people to the digital space. That's key, but I think maybe the next big thing is got more to do with how digital then brings people to a place to start conversations and then get them out to the physical interactions with the brands. So for some of your brands here, that doesn't really apply. But that's certainly what we've been talking about, is the whole idea of whether your brand is a destination brand or not, where do you find places where it makes sense for them, for people to congregate, to drive to live interactions that's credible and relevant and not a stretch for the brand. But it does play into a bit of a value shift we're starting to see now, where it's not that digital is bad, but you're hearing more social commentary around how we use our devices all the time. And perhaps it's time to mix it up with a little more real human interaction.
So we've got time for one question. Anybody?
I work for a company and kind of head up the social and website, and I'm just very curious about the size of the teams that you have in place. I guess mostly for MLSC and maybe Cirque du Soleil, that you have creating content and distributing.
My group is really is almost the internal media agency for all the brands. So we have folks that are concentrating within platforms, and then executors that are living it by brand. But the entire marketing group, or the foundation part of that is my group, is around 50 people for 4 brands, Real Sports, our networks. So any front-facing customer brand is really handled by this team, and then there's executors. Depending on the size of that particular brand, there's people there. But what we've done, and this is only in the last 6 months, is really go all in on that concept that media is media, and the platforms are just tools within the brand teams and within the people that are living each of our sports brands to do all of them, versus we've got a social media crew and a mobile crew and an online crew. We've actually got people divided by brands, and I would say there's anywhere from if you divide the managers and all that stuff, there's anywhere from 10 to 12 people on each of our brands, and they all work together to provide those experiences wherever and whenever they should be done.
Thank you.